In the wild world of Indian politics, there are some stories that are just so contradictory, so out there, you can hardly believe they're real. And the story of Rajesh Ranjan, who everybody knows as Pappu Yadav, is right at the top of that list. We're talking about a man who's been called a messiah by some and a murderer by others, a celebrated public servant and a convicted criminal.
So that brings us to the big question, the one we're going to unpack today. How on earth does someone with a history of gang wars and a murder conviction not only survive, but thrive in politics? How do they get to the very top, win people's hearts, and even get an award for being the best parliamentarian? It's a story that just seems to break all the rules.
And this slide, it just lays it all out, doesn't it? On one side, you've got a rap sheet that reads like a crime thriller: murder, kidnapping, leading a gang. But on the other side, a 5-time member of parliament, a guy who got an award for being one of the best lawmakers in the country. He even won an election while sitting in a jail cell. These aren't two different men. This is Pappu Yadav.
Okay, so to really get how this is even possible, we have to go back, way back to the beginning. We need to see how a boy from a pretty well-off family turned into one of Bihar's most feared strongmen, or as they call them, a Bahubali. His life just escalated with incredible speed. He wasn't some poor kid fighting to survive. His family was rich, they owned land, but he was drawn to violence. There's this story that he sold his own mother's jewelry just to buy his first gun. He ends up in jail for a college fight, and it's there, in prison, that he links up with a local gangster. And when that gangster gets killed, Pappu Yadav, still just a young guy, steps up and takes over the whole show.
So, you've got this young, ambitious guy who's now a crime boss. What's the next logical step? Well, in 1990s Bihar, it was politics, and the social situation back then was a perfect storm, one that he figured out how to ride better than almost anyone. The whole game changed with something called the Mandal Commission. Basically, the government brought in job reservations for what are known as other backward classes, or OBCs. And this, well, it lit a fire across the country. In Bihar especially, it turned into an all-out battle between upper and lower castes for power, for jobs, for respect. And right in the middle of this chaos, Pappu Yadav saw his chance. He styled himself as the tough guy, the protector of his Yadav caste, the one who wasn't afraid to get his hands dirty to fight for their interests. And that image was so incredibly powerful that he won his first election when he was only 23, even though he was actually too young to legally run for office. But here's the thing you have to understand. His rise in politics wasn't just about giving speeches and winning votes. It went hand in hand with an absolute explosion of violence. We're talking a bitter rivalry, brutal gang wars, and in the end, a murder that would send shockwaves through the entire state. You know how they say every hero needs a villain? Well, in this story, Pappu Yadav's villain was a man named Anand Mohan Singh. And Singh was like his perfect mirror image, another powerful Bahubali politician, but he represented the upper caste Rajputs and was dead set against the Mandal reservations. Their personal fight turned the state's caste tensions into a literal gang war.
And this local saying, man, it tells you everything you need to know about the mindset at the time. Rome belongs to the Pope, and Madhapura belongs to the Yadavs. This wasn't just about politics. It was a fight for territory, for dominance, for your very identity.
And the fallout from this rivalry was just brutal. While nobody has the exact numbers, it's widely believed that over 100 people died in the clashes between the gangs run by these two men. It was practically a civil war in that part of Bihar.
But the biggest name to fall during this bloody period was a man who was the total opposite of Pappu Yadav. His name was Ajit Sarkar. He was this beloved communist leader, a 4-time MLA that people called a messiah for the poor. The guy was so honest that after 15 years in office, he still lived in a rented house. He raised money by collecting single 1-rupee coins from his supporters. And he was one of the very few people brave enough to publicly call out Pappu Yadav.
On June 14, 1998, Ajit Sarkar was silenced forever. But this wasn't just a hit, it was a horrifying statement. His car was ambushed, and it was riddled with over 100 bullets. The message was loud and clear. If you oppose us, you will be eliminated. So India's top investigative agency, the CBI, gets on the case, and they start piecing together a conspiracy. They claimed Pappu Yadav met the hitmen, that his associates supplied the weapons, including an AK-47, and that Yadav himself gave the final kill order over the phone.
They pointed the finger directly at him as the mastermind.
After a murder that shocking, you'd think the story's over, right? The law finally started to catch up. Pappu Yadav was arrested, he was put on trial, and eventually, he was convicted. And for a lot of people, it really felt like this was the end of the road for him.
But just look at this timeline. It's an absolute roller coaster. He gets arrested in '99. Then in 2004, he actually wins a seat in the national parliament from his jail cell. In 2008, he's convicted and gets life in prison. But then the story takes another twist. In 2013, he's acquitted.
And you have to understand, being in prison barely slowed him down. The guy was running a political empire from behind bars. He started his own political party. He was winning elections, and when they finally raided his cell, they found him with a bunch of illegal cell phones. He was still calling the shots. And this brings us to what is, frankly, the most mind-bending part of this whole story: the comeback. This is how a man convicted of masterminding a murder plots his reinvention and strolls right back into the halls of Parliament.
So how did he walk free? Well, it all came down to a legal phrase, benefit of doubt. The High Court basically said that the CBI's evidence just wasn't strong enough to prove his guilt beyond any doubt. And just like that, he was out. That acquittal became the launchpad for a brand new public image. The moment he was out, he started this massive strategic image makeover. The whole Bahubali strongman thing, that got pushed to the background. Instead, he became the Jan Sewak, the public servant. Suddenly, he's everywhere, helping people during floods, distributing aid during the COVID-19 pandemic, rebranding himself as a champion of the poor. And get this, the rebranding was so good, so unbelievably successful, that in 2015, just 2 years after getting out of jail for a murder conviction, Pappu Yadav was in Parliament, accepting an award for being one of its best-performing members. You just can't make this stuff up. His comeback also created this really unique piece of political history. In 2014, he got elected to Parliament, and so did his wife, Ranjit Ranjan. But here's the crazy part. They won seats for 2 different rival political parties. It was the first time that had ever happened in India, and it just shows you the kind of political power this family has. And in what might be the most surreal twist of all, he's even made peace with his old arch-nemesis, Anand Mohan Singh. I mean, the 2 guys whose gangs were literally at war, killing each other on the streets of Bihar, have been photographed hugging like long-lost brothers. It's like they just closed the book on that entire violent chapter of their lives. So here's where we're left. The court acquitted Pappu Yadav. Legally, the case is closed, but a huge, disturbing question just hangs in the air. If the man who was convicted of the crime didn't actually do it, then who was responsible for the 107 bullets that killed the people's messiah, Ajit Sarkar? That's a question the system has never really answered.